Assalamualaikum. My name is Professor Dr. Rashid Zia. I hope all of you are fine. Today is 1st of September and most likely we will all see you on the 15th of September when the normal classes are going to resume, inshallah. Today I am going to discuss diabetes mellitus in children. First of all, the definition: metabolic disorder of multiple etiologies characterized by chronic hyperglycemia with disturbances of carbohydrate, fat, protein metabolism resulting from defects of insulin secretion, insulin action, or both. So basically the blood sugar is high due to ineffectiveness of insulin. The old classification up to 1985 are type 1 insulin dependent, type 2 non-insulin dependent, and the type 1 is usually in children and type 2 is usually in adults. The type 2 patients are usually obese. Sometimes they are not obese, and the third variety is gestational diabetes, when the pregnant woman develops diabetes during pregnancy. The new classification, which is based on WHO, is based on the etiology, not on the type of treatment or age of the patient. Type 1, when there is a beta cell destruction and absolute insulin deficiency, it is usually immune mediated or idiopathic. And the type 2 diabetes is predominantly insulin resistant with relative insulin deficiency, predominantly excretory defect with insulin resistance. So this is a new WHO classification, type 1 and type 2. Other specific types are genetic defects of beta cell function, that is usually a maturity onset diabetes of the young, MODY, that is a maturity onset diabetes of the young. Syndromes, mitochondrial mutations, infections like congenital rubella and CMV infections, in diseases of pancreas like pancreatitis, trauma, removal of the pancreas, that is pancreatectomy, neoplasia of the pancreas, and another genetic disorders that is called cystic fibrosis. Endocrinopathies like acromegaly, Cushing syndrome, pheochromocytomas, these patients can present with diabetes. Drug or chemical induced like nicotinic acid, glucocorticoids, and thiazides diuretics. Genetic disorders with diabetes. Common disorders are Down syndrome, Turner syndrome, Klinefelter syndrome, Prader-Willi syndrome. The children suffering from these syndromes are more prone to develop diabetes. Gestational diabetes mellitus, I have already mentioned that diabetes is during pregnancy, and neonatal diabetes mellitus. Type 1 diabetes mellitus, formerly called insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus or juvenile diabetes because it occurs in children and it is insulin dependent. This diabetes is characterized by low or absent levels of endogenously produced insulin. So if you measure insulin level in this type 1 diabetes mellitus patient, the insulin level is either low or absent. The epidemiology of this disease is most commonly endocrine disorders of childhood and adolescence. The onset occurs predominantly in childhood, with the two peaks, one 5 to 7 years and another at puberty, but it may present at any age. I have seen children less than 2 years of age presenting with type 1 diabetes mellitus, but there are two peaks. One is between 5 and 7 years of age and other one at puberty. In India, an average prevalence of type 1 diabetes is 10 per 100,000 population. In Pakistan, it is 7 per 100,000 population. So it is slightly less in Pakistan. Risk of development of type 1 diabetes mellitus. If mother has type 1 diabetes mellitus, the risk in child is 2%. If father is affected, risk is 7%. In a sibling of the index case is estimated as 6%. If one of the brother or sister is having diabetes type 1, then the other sibling has 6% chances of developing diabetes mellitus. The risk is 6 to 10% in diazygotic twins and 30 to 60% in monozygotic twins. So the chances of developing diabetes mellitus in monozygotic twins is quite high, that is between 30 to 65%. Pathogenesis and natural history. The natural history includes distinct stages. The first is initiation of autoimmunity. Number 2, preclinical autoimmunity with a progressive loss of beta cell functions. Number 3, onset of clinical disease. Number 4, transient remission, which is also known as honeymoon period, when the child gets slightly better. Established disease after the honeymoon period. And then the last one is development of complications, which usually occur 10 years after diabetes. This is pancreas. Close-up view of an islets of Langerhans. These are the ducts. These are delta cells, red blood cells, pancreatic acini. This is a pancreas. This is alpha cells. This is a beta cells. The beta cells are light blue, and then these are islets of Langerhans. These beta cells, these one light blue color secrete insulin, and the alpha cells, these dark brown, secrete glucagon. The autoimmunity occurs in islets of Langerhans against the beta cells. So these islets of Langerhans, there is antibodies against them, and then they destroy the beta cells which secrete insulin. This is a graph which shows the genetic susceptibility. If you are exposed to unknown environmental trigger, the chances that you develop autoimmunity, and then there is a progressive beta cell loss, and then you develop clinical diabetes, and then maybe a clinical remission. If there is an autoimmunity, no apparent beta cell loss, the mechanism is unknown, and then you don't develop diabetes. If you develop clinical diabetes, after some years you are prone to develop complications. If you see the other side, genetic susceptibility, lack of exposure to the triggers, question mark are chances, no autoimmunity, and then there is no diabetes. This graph shows the pathogenesis of type 1 diabetes. Basically, there are immune dysregulation or environmental triggers and regulation, and they destroy the beta cells of the pancreas, and then there is no production of the insulin, and you develop diabetes mellitus type 1. Type 1 diabetes mellitus clinical presentations are diabetic ketoacidosis, that is DKA, most common presentation in pediatrics. The children usually present with respiratory distress and hyperglycemia, and they breathing fast, and that is the usual presentation of children in type 1 diabetes mellitus. They can have a classical symptoms triad like polyuria, when they pass lot of urine, especially sometimes during the night, or may develop nocturnal enuresis. They drinking a lot, that is a polydipsia, and despite polydipsia and eating quite a lot, they are losing weight. Sometimes is just accidentally diagnosed. You have a blood sugar level for some other reason, and you find to have hyperglycemia, and they diagnosed as the type 1 diabetes mellitus. But classically, you present with a polyuria, polydipsia, weight loss, or straight into as a case of diabetic ketoacidosis. The diagnostic criteria are in symptomatic, that a child is if having a polydipsia, polyuria, weight loss. Children, a random plasma glucose more than 11.1 millimole, that is 200 milligram, is diagnostic. If you check his blood sugar, and if it is more than 11 millimole or 200 milligram, then he or she is suffering from type 1 diabetes. If hemoglobin A1C is more than 6.5%, then it is also diagnostic criteria. Remember, acute infections in young non-diabetic children can cause hyperglycemia without ketoacidosis. The modified oral glucose tolerance test, when you give oral glucose 1.7 milligram per kilogram, maximum 75 gram, may be needed in asymptomatic children with hyperglycemia, or symptomatic with hyperglycemia when the random blood sugar is more between 140 to 200. Fasting blood glucose level in impaired glucose tolerance is 6 to 6.9 millimole per deciliter or 100 to 126 milligram per deciliter. And diabetic, it is more than 7 millimole or 126 milligram per deciliter. When you're doing a modified glucose tolerance test, 2 hours after the oral glucose, when you give 1.75 gram per kilogram or maximum 75 gram of glucose, the impaired glucose tolerance is 7.8 to 11 millimole or more than or 140 to 200 milligram. Or in diabetic, it is more than 200 milligram per deciliter or more than 11 millimole per millimole. So you have, in a borderline cases, you have to do a modified oral glucose tolerance test, and in that case you have to measure first the fasting blood glucose level and then 2 hours after the oral glucose. Treatment elements it is a disease which you have to suffer from rest of your life, so education of the patient, in this case the child and the parents and the other siblings or the whole family, is very important, because the child suffering from type 1 diabetes mellitus needs a lot of input to fight with the disease. So you must spend a lot of time and provide them leaflets for the education of how to deal with this crisis and how you can minimize the effects of the disease. Then second part is insulin therapy, how to give insulin, how much, in which way. There are different types of insulin, so you have to educate them about insulin therapy. Then how to measure the blood glucose, that is glycemic control monitoring. You have to train them to use the glucose measuring devices. There are many devices, I will show you. Then you have to involve the dietitian to regulate their diet and the meal planning, because if we are non-diabetic, our pancreas produce insulin according to our blood sugar and it is an auto-regulation. But if the beta cells are damaged and there is no or very low insulin, then you have to plan your diet according to your insulin regime and requirements. It is not auto-regulation. Prevention and early detection of complication is also very important, because if your diabetes is not controlled, you will develop the complication earlier, and also there are many other problems associated with uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. We will discuss the complications of diabetes mellitus one by one. As far as the education is concerned, educate the child and the family and caregivers, that is the parents in this case, about diabetes type 1. What is diabetes? It is a lifelong insulin therapy you have to give. There is no shortcut. People are reluctant to give insulin therapy for whole life, and sometimes they stop giving insulin. So that is very dangerous. You have to warn them that this is a life-threatening problem if you stop giving insulin therapy. Self-monitoring and maintaining record. The best thing is if the child can monitor his own disease. That means he can measure his blood sugar, he can test his urine and maintain a record of his blood sugar and hemoglobin A1C. That is best. But if the child is too young to monitor all these things, then the parents has to do that, and it is best that if you train the both parents, because sometimes father has to go outside and mother is usually the key factor at home, and she has to learn how to give insulin, how to monitor the blood sugar, and how to maintain a record. The recognition of the hypoglycemia and diabetic ketoacidosis is also very important, because your blood sugar can go up and down. So obviously you must recognize when it is low and when the child is suffering from diabetic ketoacidosis, which is a life-threatening problem or complication of diabetes. As I said, we have to make a meal plan. You can't eat indiscriminately high sugar and carbohydrate, so you have to divide your meals and snacks in between your main meals. Some days you're not feeling well, it's a sick day, and you have to monitor your blood sugar more vigorously, and you have to take your food and sometimes extra insulin. And the possible long-term complications you have to discuss with the parents and the child. The main treatment is insulin. Before the insulin was discovered, almost all children are used to die due to diabetic ketoacidosis. So it is a blessing for them that the insulin was invented, and that is a life-saving medicine for type 1 diabetes mellitus. Insulin is a polypeptide made of 2 beta chains. It was discovered by Benz and Best in 1921. So it's almost 100 years ago the insulin therapy was discovered. Animal types, porcine or bovine, were used before the introduction of human-like insulin, that is the DNA recombinant types. Before that, the insulin was used to be extracted from bovine or porcine, and it has lot of problems. But since the introduction of human-like insulin, which is a DNA recombinant types, the complications due to insulin therapy are much less, and it is more easily tolerated by the patient. Recently, more potent insulin analogs are produced by changing amino acid sequence. Rapid acting insulin, the examples are insulin Lispro or insulin S part. The onset begins to work at about 5 minutes. The peak is about 1 hour, and the duration of the action is continued to work for about 2 to 4 hours. So this is a rapid acting insulin when you need to lower the blood sugar immediately. So the action starts within 5 minutes and peak 1 hour, and the maximum duration of action is 2 to 4 hours. Then the second type is regular or short acting insulin. Example, insulin regular. Onset reaches the bloodstream within 30 minutes after injection. Peak time peaks anywhere from 2 to 3 hours after injection, and the duration of action is effective for approximately 3 to 6 hours. Then there is an intermediate acting insulin. Examples are NPH and Lanate. The onset reaches the bloodstream about 2 to 4 hours after injection. Peak time peaks 4 to 12 hours later, and the duration effective for about 12 to 18 hours. And then long acting insulin. Examples are insulin glargine. The onset reaches the bloodstream 6 to 10 hours after injection, and the duration usually effective for 20 to 24 hours. So you have to give once in a day. Insulin concentrations are insulin available in different concentrations like 40 units, 80 units and 100 units per ml depending on the weight of the child. So there are three concentrations. The insulins are available: 40 units per ml, 80 units per ml and 100 units per ml. WHO now recommends units 100 per ml to be the only used insulin to prevent confusion. Special preparation for infusion pump is soluble insulin 500 units per ml. So WHO, because there is sometimes confusion in buying insulin, sometimes the medical people give you different concentration insulins, or the pharmacist give you. So WHO wants that you use one insulin that is either 40 or 80 or 100 to be the only used insulin to prevent such confusion. As we using now insulin pumps, so there is a special preparation for infusion pump is soluble insulin 500 units per ml, because you have to load the insulin pump with the soluble insulin because it lasts longer. I will show you how the insulin pump is working. In European Union and in America, it is mandatory that all the children with type 1 diabetes mellitus must be provided with an insulin pump to manage their diabetes mellitus. Key aspects of insulin therapy: the aim is to mimic natural pattern of insulin secretion. So the best thing is that you follow the natural pattern, that whenever we eat, the insulin is secreted by the beta cells. The administration is insulin is administered subcutaneously using insulin syringes, pens or insulin pumps. So these are the three methods or a way when how can we give insulin? Either using insulin syringes, or there are insulin pens when there is a preloaded insulin, or the latest variety is insulin pumps. The dose decay with overt symptoms, total daily dose is 0.8 to 1 unit per kilogram per day. Incidentally diagnosed at lower dose, toddlers and preschool 2 to 5 years 0.2 to 0.4 units per kilogram per day. Pre-pubertal children 5 to 9 years 0.5 to 0.8 units per kilogram per day. Adolescents 9 to 14 years 0.8 to 1.5 unit per kilogram per day. These insulin therapy and the dosage are a guideline, but the dosage in my experience varies with every child, and also you have to keep in mind their blood sugar and also their eating patterns. These doses are just a guideline when you want to start somebody on insulin therapy. Key aspects of insulin therapy: as I told you, you can't give insulin orally, you have to inject the insulin. So the injection sites are anterolateral thighs. These are the parts of thighs you can use. Anterior and lateral abdominal wall. So the interior and lateral abdominal wall. The posterior aspect of the upper arm, these sides, upper outer arms. These supralateral aspects of the buttocks, you can use the superior and the outer parts of the buttocks, supralateral aspects of buttock. So basically you can use the abdomen wall, anterolateral, the upper outer thighs and the upper outer arms and the buttocks. Side rotation is very important. Following a regular pattern of using the different sides and the different areas within the same site is important. So you have to rotate the injection sites to different places to get more absorption of the insulin to keep your control up to mark. You have to, the key aspects of the insulin therapies are different regime. You have to split the mixed regime, that is you have to give a short acting, a regular. So mixed start is 30-70 or NPH is 2/3 plus regular insulin 1/3 twice a daily. That is a 2/3 dose 45 minutes before breakfast and 1/3 dose 45 minutes before dinner. There are many regimes, so you have to follow either one of these, and you must explain to the parents that how we can give and what different types of insulin are given. The second regime is a basal bolus regime with a multiple daily injections, that is 30 to 50% of the total daily dose as one dose, long acting like glargine. And 3 to 4 doses of rapid acting insulin, 3 to 4 doses of rapid insulin as a reminder. So it varies with different patients and the different consultants. Some people are give a split mix regime and some people give basal bolus regime. I prefer a split mix regime because in that way you can have a better control of your blood sugar, and most of the children like split mix regime, but people have also good experience with the basal bolus regime with the multiple daily injections. As I mentioned to you, apart from the syringes or insulin pump, insulin pens, the new mode of injection of insulin is through the insulin pump therapy, and it gives you a continuous subcutaneous insulin infusion via battery powered pumps. Provide a closer approximation of normal plasma insulin profile. It accurately delivers a small baseline continuous infusion of insulin coupled with the parameters for bolus therapy. The bolus insulin determined by the amount of carbohydrate intake and blood sugar level. So the pump, because it is a battery operated, they provide slow continuous subcutaneous insulin infusion, which is a more proximate and closer to the approximation of a normal plasma insulin profiles. This is the pump. This is called insulin pump. There is a cartridge inside, and that contains 500 units of insulin, and this is the tubing, and this is the needle subcutaneously, and it continuously giving insulin therapy. There is a battery inside, and when the battery is low, it bleeps you. You can adjust the insulin regime by these controls. The insulin pump, this is a tubing, and this is the infusion set. This is infusion set, this is tubing, and this is insulin pump. How does the insulin get into your body? Insulin in the blood. Flexible tubing deliver insulin from the pump reservoir to the infusion set, and that it goes inside insulin pump. A tiny tube called a cannula is inserted under your skin to provide insulin. So this is a very small pump. You can easily hide under your shirt, and nobody even knows that you are suffering from diabetes mellitus, because it is a social stigma also on children. I have seen many children in UK, those who are suffering with type 1 diabetes mellitus, but none of their class fellows knows that they are suffering from type 1 diabetes, because most of them have pump. Only the teacher knows that he or she is suffering from type 1 diabetes mellitus, or the school doctor, because they can have hypo or hyperglycemia in the school. So one must know that he or she is suffering from a type 1 diabetes mellitus. Monitoring of the glycemic control is very important. You self-monitoring of the blood glucose. You can do a fasting level. You can do it before and 2 hours after meals, and during night or random, that is measuring of the blood glucose. You can do a real-time continuous glucose monitoring You can check the urine for urinary glucose, and that reflects the glycemic level over the preceding several hours. It is positive if renal threshold is exceeded. It is a crude indicator of hyperglycemia. So the best thing is a real-time continuous glucose monitoring. In the modern glucose insulin pump, you can have a real-time continuous glucose monitoring in addition to giving insulin continuously subcutaneously, so that will monitor the glycemic control very nicely. And the pump has a memory, so you can see the blood glucose for the last 24 or 48 hours. So it is an excellent device to control the type 1 and to treat the type 1 diabetes in children. You can measure the ketones in the urine. It is more sensitive and accurate. If you are unwell and if you are having a fever, vomiting, abdominal pain, polyuria, drowsiness, or rapid breathing, to diagnose diabetic ketoacidosis, you can measure the blood sugar, and you can also measure the ketones in the urine. Then there is a glycosylated hemoglobin, which is known as hemoglobin A1C, every 3 to 4 monthly. It gives you a glycemic control over the past 3 months, and it should be within normal levels for a normal glycemic control and to prevent having complications due to high blood sugar level. There are adverse effects of insulin. They can cause hypoglycemia, they can cause lipoatrophy, where you inject the insulin. It can cause lipoatrophy and hypertrophy. It can lead to obesity. You can have allergy to insulin if you keep on using different brands, and you can develop antibodies against insulin when the insulin becomes less effective. Practical problems are non-availability of insulin in poor countries because it is an expensive thing to have insulin everywhere available. Injection sites and technique, insulin storage and transfer. You have to keep insulin at a certain temperature. Mixing insulin preparation, you need education. Insulin and school hours, you have to adjust your insulin regime during school, and to keep the insulin at school in a fridge. And with the provision of an insulin pump, these problems have been reduced. Adjusting insulin dose at home and sick day management, when you either reducing or increasing the insulin level, and the recognition and the treatment of hypoglycemia at home, in supermarket or in school. Management on sick days. Insulin requirement may increase or decrease during illness. Fever, dehydration, and the stress of illness can cause hyperglycemia due to increased production of counter-regulatory hormones, whereas vomiting and loss of appetite can lead to hypoglycemia. The risk of ketosis is increased due to starvation and dehydration. Management on sick days. Take plenty of fluids. Blood glucose and urine ketones monitored frequently. Moderate or large ketones in the urine in the presence of hyperglycemia indicate insulin deficiency and risk of diabetic ketoacidosis. Child should be given rapid acting analog or a regular insulin, and oral fluids and ketones should be rechecked in the next urine. If there is a vomiting with hyperglycemia and large ketones or persistent hypoglycemia, child should be taken to emergency department of the hospital. Diet regulation. Regular meal plans with a caloric exchange options are encouraged. 50 to 60% of required energy to be obtained from complex carbohydrates. Distribute carbohydrate load evenly during the day, preferably 3 meals and 2 snacks with the avoidance of simple sugars. Encourage low salt, low saturated fats and high fiber diet. Diet regulations. Avoid simple sugars in patient with a split mix regime. 6 meals, 3 major, 70% of the total calories, and 3 mid meals, 30% of the total calories are derived from these meals. In children with a multiple dose regime, mid meal is not essential. Majority of the calories should be consumed as a part of the meals. Mid meal should have less than 10 to 15 gram of carbohydrate. Glycemic index. Ranking of carbohydrate on a scale from 0 to 100 according to the extent to which they raise blood sugar level after eating. Foods with a high GI are those which are rapidly digested and absorbed and result in a marked fluctuation in blood sugar level, like cornflakes, potato, watermelon, biscuits, chocolates. Low GI foods, by virtue of their slow digestion and absorption, produce gradual rise in blood sugar and insulin levels and have proven benefit diabetics, like most fruits and vegetables except potato and watermelon, pasta, pulses, milk and curd. Exercise. Decreased insulin requirement in diabetic subjects by increasing both sensitivity of muscle cells to insulin and glucose utilization. So regular exercise is very important in children. It can precipitate hypoglycemia in the unprepared diabetic patient, so you have to keep within your limits and regularly checking blood sugar level during or after the exercise. Assalamualaikum, I am Dr. Rashid Zia. Sorry, we have to make a new lecture because of the technical problems, and we will continue with the diabetes type 1. The exercise decreases insulin requirement in diabetic subjects by increasing both sensitivity of muscle cells to insulin and also glucose utilization. So I recommend that the children who are suffering from diabetes, they must exercise on regular basis. It can precipitate hypoglycemia in the unprepared diabetic patients, so you have to keep a balance amongst the exercise and also the glucose level. So you can check before and after doing exercise your blood sugar level, and if you feeling hypo, then you must stop and take exercise and take some glucose drink. The pitfalls of management are sometimes there is a delayed diagnosis of insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus because the children usually drink lot of fluids by habit, so people take it as a normal. Sometimes there is a honeymoon period when the blood sugar becomes normal despite suffering from diabetes mellitus type 1. Problems with diagnosis and treatment of diabetic ketoacidosis and hypoglycemia. There is a Smoggy's effect and Down phenomena may go unrecognized. We will discuss the Smoggy's effect and Down phenomena. The Down phenomena is when the blood glucose levels increases in early morning hours before breakfast due to decline in insulin levels, which results in elevated morning glucose. This phenomena mainly caused by overnight growth hormone secretion and increased insulin clearance. It is a normal physiological process seen in most adolescents without diabetes who compensate with more insulin output. Child with diabetes mellitus cannot compensate. The Smoggy phenomena is a theoretical rebound from late night or early morning hypoglycemia thought to be from an exaggerated counter-regulatory response. Continuous glucose monitoring systems or nighttime blood glucose may help clarify ambiguously elevated morning glucose levels. Complications of diabetes are divided into an acute and the late onset. Acute are diabetic ketoacidosis, hypoglycemia, and hyperosmolar coma. Late onset are retinopathy, neuropathy, nephropathy, ischemic heart disease, and stroke. Guidelines regarding monitoring for complications, as I mentioned, hemoglobin A1C 3 to 4 times per year. Every 3 monthly we normally recommend. Height and weight 3 to 4 times per year. Nutritional counseling by the dietitian at diagnosis and then 4 to 6 weeks later than annually. Lipid profile, prepubertal child every 5 years, pubertal child within 6 to 12 months after diagnosis, then every 2 years, and blood pressure annually after age of 10 years. Prevention and early detection of complication, retinopathy screening after 5-year duration in prepubertal children and after 2 years in pubertal children. Frequency 1 to 2 yearly. Method preferred is fundal photography. Nephropathy screening after 5 years duration in prepubertal children and after 2 years in pubertal children. And the frequency is annually. Preferred method spot urine sample for ketones, glucose. Neuropathy screening unclear in children, adults at diagnosis in type 2 diabetes mellitus and 5 years after diagnosis in type 1 diabetes mellitus. Frequency unclear. Method preferred is a physical examination. Macrovascular diseases screening after age 2 years. Frequency every 5 years. Method preferred lipid profile test. Fasting. Thyroid disease screening at diagnosis. Frequency every 2 to 3 years or more frequently based on symptoms or the presence of anti-thyroid antibodies. method preferred is TSH level. Celiac disease is more common in diabetes type 1, and so it is screening at diagnosis plus frequency every 2 to 3 years. Method preferred is a tissue transglutaminase endomycelial antibody TTA. Management of acute complications. Diabetic ketoacidosis is the most important life-threatening complications of type 1 diabetes mellitus. DK, a life-threatening complication of diabetes mellitus, occurs more commonly in children with type 1 diabetes mellitus than type 2 diabetes mellitus. DK in children is defined as hyperglycemia when the serum glucose concentration is more than 200 to 300 mg per deciliter in the presence of metabolic acidosis. Blood pH less than 7.3 with a serum bicarbonate level less than 15 milliequivalent per liter, and ketonemia, presence of ketones in the urine. Signs and symptoms of diabetic ketoacidosis are nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, fruity odor in breath, tachycardia, low volume pulses, hypotension, impaired skin turgor, delayed capillary refill time, dehydration, rapid deep sinking respiration, small respiration due to metabolic acidosis. Classification of diabetic ketoacidosis: if CO2 milliequivalent per liter venous is 20 to 80, 28 is normal. In mild cases it is 16 to 20, in moderate it is 10 to 15, and in severe cases of diabetic ketoacidosis the CO2 milliequivalent per liter in the venous sample is less than 10. pH in normal cases is 7.35 to 7.45. In mild cases of diabetic ketoacidosis it is between 7.25 to 7.35. In moderate cases the pH is 7.15 to 7.25, and in severe cases it is less than 7.15. Clinical normal, no changes, mild orientated, alert but fatigue. In moderate there is a small respirations, orientated but sleepy and arousable. In severe cases of diabetic ketoacidosis is a small or depressed respiration, sleepy to depressed, sensorium to coma. Diabetic ketoacidosis treatment protocol: in the first hour you have to give 10 to 20 ml per kilogram IV bolus, 0.9% normal saline, insulin drip at 0.05 to 0.10 units per kilogram per hour. Command: quick volume expansion may be repeated. NPO, nothing by mouth. Monitor vitals, neurological status. Use flow sheets. Have mannitol at bedside. 1 gram per kilogram IV push for cerebral edema. Second hour until DK resolution, 0.45 sodium chloride plus continue insulin drip, 20 milliequivalents per liter potassium phosphate and 0.5 glucose if blood sugar less than 250 milligram per deciliter. IV rate 85 ml per kilogram plus maintenance bolus in 23 hours. If potassium less than 3 milliequivalent per liter, give 0.5 to 1 milliequivalent per kilogram as oral potassium solution, or increase IV potassium to 80 milliequivalents per liter. After correction of dehydration and acidosis, oral intake with subcutaneous insulin, no emesis, CO2 more than 16 milliequivalent, normal electrolytes. Transition to subcutaneous insulin therapy. As oral feeds advanced, IV fluid reduced and changed to subcutaneous insulin planned. Timing: ideal time to begin is just before a meal. Rapid acting insulin are administered subcutaneous 15 to 30 minutes prior, and regular insulin 1 to 2 hours prior to stopping infusion to avoid rebound hyperglycemia. Dose for patient with DK at discontinued onset. Recommend TD is 0.7 to 1 unit per kilogram pre-pubertal and 1 to 1.5 units per kilogram in pubertal age. Before breakfast, 1/3 regularly and 2/3 NPH insulin. Before dinner, 1/3 regular and 2/3 NPH insulin is recommended. Management: for cerebral edema. Cerebral edema can be associated with the diabetic ketoacidosis, so you have to be very cautious about this complication because there is a high mortality with cerebral edema in DK patient. The management is head and elevation. Give mannitol 0.5 to 1 gram per kilogram and repeat if there is no response in 30 minutes to 2 hours. 3% hypertonic saline 5 ml per kilogram over 30 minutes can be given. Restrict IV fluid to 2/3. Replace fluid deficit in 72 hours rather than 24 hours. Intubation and ventilation if required. Non-ketotic hyperosmolar coma. Severe hyperglycemia, blood glucose more than 800 mg per deciliter, absence of or only slight ketosis, non-ketotic acidosis, severe dehydration, depressed sensorium or frank coma, and various neurological signs that may include grand mal seizures, hyperthermia, hemiparesis, and positive Babinski signs. Respirations are usually shallow, but coexistent metabolic acidosis may be manifested by small breathing. Serum osmolarity is commonly 350 milliosmol per kilogram or greater. This condition is uncommon This condition, serum osmolarity is commonly 350 milliosmol per kilogram or greater. This condition is uncommon in children, luckily. Rapid depletion of the vascular volume deficit and very slow correction of the hyperosmolar state is recommended. 1/2 isotonic saline, that is 0.45% sodium chloride, administered at a rate estimated to replace 50% of the volume deficit in the first 12 hours and remainder if administered in ensuing 24 hours. When blood glucose concentration approaches to 300 mg per deciliter, the hydration fluid should be changed to 5% dextrose in 0.2 normal saline. Approximately 20 milliequivalent per liter of potassium chloride should be added to each of these fluids to prevent hypokalemia. Insulin can be given by continuous intravenous infusion beginning with the second hour of the fluid therapy. The IV insulin dosage should be 0.05 units per kilogram. Blood glucose less than 70 milliequivalent per liter, risk increases as the duration of the diabetes increases. The next complication is hypoglycemia, which one should be very familiar with that, because it can cause brain damage and it can easily be managed at home. The child must have experience of feelings of hypoglycemia induced in the hospital to make him aware that he or she is suffering from hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia occurs when blood glucose is less than 70 mg per deciliter. Risk increases as the duration of the diabetes increases. Mild to moderate symptoms: immediate oral intake of 0.3 gram per kilogram of glucose dissolved in small amount of water raises the blood glucose value by 45 to 65 mg per deciliter. Blood glucose is retested after 10 to 15 minutes and the glucose re-administered if the response is inadequate. Chocolate, milk, sweets containing fat are not a good choices as the fat delays the absorption of glucose. Treating it with the child's favorite sweets or beverage should be avoided. Severe hypoglycemia, when there is an altered mental status, unconsciousness or seizures. Glucagon is administered subcutaneously or intramuscularly. Dose is 0.5 mg for the less than 12 years of age and 0.1 mg for greater than 12 years of old children. If glucagon injections are not available, glucose gel, honey can be administered into buccal patch. Recent advances in diabetes, pancreas and islet cell transplantation. Pancreas transplants are usually given to diabetes with the end-stage renal disease. Islet cell transplants, the ultimate treatment of type 1 diabetes, is under trial in many centers in the USA and Europe with encouraging results, but graft rejection and reoccurrence of autoimmunity are serious complications. Immune modulation, immunosuppressive therapy for newly diagnosed, prolong the honeymoon period for high-risk children. Immune modulating drugs are nicotinamide and mycophenolate. They are under trial. Gene therapy blocks the immunological attack against islet cells by DNA plasmid encoding self-antigen. Gene encode cytokines inhibitors, modifying gene expressed islet cell antigen like GAD, TAD. Prediction of diabetes: sensitive or specific immunological markers like GAD antibodies, GLAMA antibodies, IA2 antibodies. For single antibody, risk is 2 to 6%, 2 antibodies risk is 21 to 40%, and more than 2 antibody risk is 59 to 80%. It is for the children with the first degree relatives suffering from diabetes. Prevention of diabetes. Primary prevention is identification of the diabetes gene, tampering with the immune system, elimination of environmental factors. Secondary prevention is due to immunosuppressive therapy like cyclosporine, GLP-1 agonist. Tertiary prevention, tight metabolic control and good monitoring. Thank you very much. I hope this will I hope this will help you to understand diabetes. If you have any question, please email me. My email address is rzia56@hotmail.com. My mobile number is 0300 8440973, and my WhatsApp number is same 0300 8440973. Please feel free to ask me any question. Thank you very much. Khuda Hafiz.